Bullies come in all forms. There were just a couple of weeks left to school. Summer was just around the corner. Classes were coming to an end, and teachers were winding things down. Not wanting to start any new lessons, they would try to come up with small sessions that took up time but didn't take a lot of work on anyone's part. The social studies and religion teacher, Mrs. F., was particularly creative one day. With no formal lesson plan, she thought up a great exercise for fifth grade students. She starts the class with, "Now, class, an important lesson that we all must learn is how to take criticism. There will always be things that others do not like about you. By listening to the criticism and changing our behavior, we become better people. During today's class, I want each of you to look around the room, pick a person, and tell the entire class some behavior you don't like about that person. We'll go around the room starting with this row. Susie, please stand up and tell everyone what you don't like about someone in this class." Now, everyone looked around, wondering what this was all about. They knew Mrs. F. had a mean streak. It showed up every day, but they weren't sure how to take this. The kids were stuck. They didn't know what else to do. No one wanted to get her mad and be sent to the principal's office. So Susie stood up nervously, looked around, and picked on a kid behind her. "I don't like the way Jackie kicks my purse off the back of my chair." Susie sat down quickly, turned to Jackie, and shrugged helplessly. Jackie stood up. "Michael has a nervous habit of shaking his leg, and my desk shakes when he does that." The class followed suit, each coming up with some lame statement that would get him or her off the hook without hurting anyone's feelings. As this was going on, one very shy student in the back was agonizing over what she was going to say. Faith didn't like standing up and speaking in front of the class in the first place. She'd rather just sit in the back and disappear. But this assignment upset her. This was a Catholic grade school. The kids were taught to treat others as they would want to be treated. Her parents always told her and her sisters to be nice to each other. If you couldn't say anything nice about someone, then don't say anything at all. The golden rule was printed on a banner on the classroom wall, for goodness sakes. She started looking around the room, trying to figure out something brief to say so she could sit down quickly, but all she could think of was how much she didn't like this assignment. This is more than just a waste of time. This is mean, just like the teacher, she thought. If we were going to do something like this, why weren't we asked to go around the room and tell something nice about each person, instead of something bad? If she really wanted to be truthful, the only person in the class who really bothered her was the teacher. For being a social studies and religion teacher, Mrs. F. wasn't very empathetic. In fact, she would go out of her way to embarrass kids in her class. She was particularly abusive to one boy, Ronald. Ronnie was an easy target because he'd just stand there and take whatever she threw at him. And she threw a lot, like chalk, erasers, books, pencils. And when he ducked, she'd get angry, pick him up, and throw him against the blackboards. Now, this was generations ago when teachers had the authority to discipline their students. Yes, if Faith wanted to change someone's behavior, it would be the teachers. But could she get away with it? Logically, she could. The assignment was to pick someone in the class, and the teacher was in the class. The teacher couldn't get mad at her because this exercise was to show how mature you can be by taking criticism, changing your behavior, becoming a better person. Wasn't it? What's the worst thing that could happen? She would be sent to the principal's office. If that happened, she'd just explain what the assignment was all about and why she picked the teacher. Now, if that happened, she didn't think she was going to be the one in the most trouble. Yes, this could work. She was so busy thinking through her plan that she didn't realize everyone's eyes were on her. It was suddenly her turn, and her mouth went dry. She slowly stood up, swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and said softly, "I don't like the way you pick on certain people in this class." Mrs. F's eyes grew big. She couldn't believe what she thought she heard. Slowly crossing the classroom, she asked, "What did you say?" The shy girl had to repeat her comment. "I don't like the way you pick on certain people in this class." Mrs. F couldn't believe that this was coming from the quiet one in the back. Everyone could hear the anger growing in the teacher's voice. "What did you say?" The girl in front of Faith helped out by saying loud and clear, "She said she didn't like the way you pick on certain people in the class." Thanks a lot, thought Faith. Now she couldn't pretend she didn't say it, and Mrs. F couldn't pretend she didn't hear it. Now only 2 steps away, Mrs. F glared down at Faith, daring her to answer the next question. "And who do I pick on?" "Well, Ronnie and Luke and thinking fast, she thought she had better put her name on the list, since she just nailed her own coffin shut. And me." She managed to get the words out, but she wanted to disappear. Maybe this wasn't a good idea after all, she thought, as she sat down, trying to shrink as low in her desk as possible. She kept her head down, daring not to look up from the floor. There was dead silence in the classroom. After an endless number of seconds had passed, Mrs. F gained her composure, somewhat, and told the next child to stand. The assignment continued, but it was just a formality. Mrs. F wasn't listening anymore. No one else was either. Thankfully, the bell rang. Class was over. Because Faith remained seated, with her head down, she had no idea that Mrs. F flew out of the door as soon as the bell rang. When she did finally look up, she saw the entire class surrounding her desk. There were smiles and looks of disbelief all around her. Then everyone started talking at once. No one could believe what she had done. They were all patting her on the back and telling her how proud they were of her, how she was a hero. In the midst of the crowd stood Ronnie. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He was literally beaming from the inside out. He gave her the biggest grin that she had ever seen on anyone. It literally reached from ear to ear. Faith didn't know it then, but she would carry that smile and that feeling with her for the rest of her life. Another thing Faith didn't know then. Mrs. F left Ronnie and every other student alone for the rest of the school year. Yeah, Faith was wrong. The assignment wasn't a waste of time, after all.